Parents Missing for 4 Years by Pauline Osborne of Cherrybrook, 2126. Narrated by Janine Penfold. At the age of 78, my son helped me discover something about my life which I had not realised or understood. We were spending precious time together when I chose to tell him about 2 persistent nightmares that I had when I was a toddler. In the first nightmare, I was lying on the sand at the edge of the surf. I was unable to move, and the tide was coming in and gradually covering me and drowning me. In the second nightmare, an extremely beautiful, exquisite doll was being driven away on the front seat of the farm truck. I was standing watching with a feeling of total devastation and loss. My son asked the question, "Mum, did you ever have a doll like that?" I replied that I only had a very small doll called Patsy, a hand-knitted red dog called Pluto, a big teddy bear, and a pram. That night, while sleeping, some answers came to me. As a toddler, I recalled my treasured grandfather taking me to bed with him, but I woke up in a different bed. This was strange because I only had one other memory of my grandfather ever having physical contact with me. At age 10, I was on the bus going home from Roseville School to my home at Terry Hills. My grandfather, surprisingly, got onto the packed bus, so naturally I stood up to give him my seat. He then put me on his knee for the rest of the journey. I felt so awkward and weird being on his knee. It was so unnatural. I then understood that the exquisite doll on the seat of the farm truck was actually my mother being driven away from me by my grandfather, and that explained the feelings of devastation and loss. Why did my mother have to leave me for 4 years? My father returned from World War II in 1946. For some unknown reason, he left the ship at Brisbane instead of his correct destination of Sydney. Both families, paternal and maternal, were extremely worried because he was missing for many weeks. When he finally turned up, he was a changed man. Mum had been paying off a block of land at Mount Colah using his army pay. My father, Don, supposedly took over the payments. It came as a huge shock when the real estate agents informed Mum that they had defaulted on the payments and had therefore lost the block of land. Don had been gambling the money at the races. With the ruckus that followed, Don deserted my mother and me. These days, he would have been diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder, not known in 1946. When I was 7, my mother completed her tailoress training and was able to take me from my darling Nana and grandparents' care for a period of 3 years. We boarded with Great Aunt Vera. We lived 500 metres away from the local library, so I was able to borrow books regularly. Being a solitary child, books became my friends. When I had read all the fairy books in the children's section, I asked the librarian for more. She introduced me to Greek and Roman mythology in the adult section. At age 10, an uncle was killed, and Mum and I could move in with my grandparents until she married my stepdad when I was almost 15. The first time my future stepdad came to dinner, I was given a stern lecture about behaving myself and not ruining my mother's chances. Grandpop, who had never punished me in his life, mentioned the razor strop hanging in the bathroom. When I started my meal of rissoles with mushroom sauce, I announced that there was a fly in my meal. On catching sight of my grandfather's face, I quickly decided it was not a fly. I was supposed to serve in a shop until I got married and had children. Overcoming my disappointment at not being allowed to apply for a university scholarship, I begged to be allowed to apply for the 2-year Teachers College scholarship. I was given permission and free board and food. I taught for 33 and a half years, retiring at age 55. It was the perfect job for me. I understood the problems of the children from my personal experience. I also understood misbehaviour because I was monstrously badly behaved throughout my childhood. I loved every single one of my pupils, and I hoped to think that it was reciprocated. At 18, I married my husband Dennis, and we had a wonderful 43-year marriage. My 2 sons gave me immeasurable joy and pride in their education and employment success. They gave me 5 incredible grandchildren. My joy terminated when Dennis had a midlife crisis 2 months before retirement. He left with a twice-divorced woman. I lay on the ground for a year. Then I managed to pick myself up and go on 15 overseas trips all over the world. Both my parents disappearing from my life for 4 years had a deeply scarring effect on me, which I did not appreciate until last year. I was a very solitary person within my heart. Although very capable with conversation and mixing with people, I had the sense that nobody, apart from my husband and family, really cared about me. When my husband abandoned me, I experienced a huge outpouring of love from every person in my life. I came to realize that I was a person of value. My ex-husband had been extremely dominant and ruled the roost. When he left, I became aware of how capable I was at organising my life and being in control. At last, I came into my own as a person of significance. My parents, missing for 4 years, was the beginning of what made me, me. The end.